I went to the sacred valley of Peru in search of a feeling. 3 months ago, I lived in a small town in the mountains of Colombia. Memories of the peaceful country life lingered with me as I moved from place to place on this 14-month journey through Latin America. After a week in Lima and a week in Cusco, I decided to move to a small, intimate village surrounded by breathtaking nature and imposing mountains. Perhaps I could capture the same feeling of contentment I felt before. Was I in for a surprise? The mountains did indeed tower above the village like a fortress. Incan ruins could be seen from any point in the cobblestone streets. The village itself was an archaeological site. Its adobe architecture and intricate water canals dated back to the 15th century. The local government shut off the water every day from 3 to 5 p.m. and again from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. Hotels and homestays don't have water cuts because they serve paying tourists that drive the local economy, so they have higher priority. Local families who live in regular houses must organize their lives around the daily water cuts. I originally booked a week at a spacious, comfortable hotel with a misleading list of amenities. The description included a kitchen, hot water for the shower, and a washer and dryer. Once I arrived, my host told me the kitchen was for his family and I had to pay to use it, as well as the laundry facilities. He also requested I tell him 1 hour before I wanted to shower so he could turn on the hot water. His logic was, in order to keep the hotel running during the low tourist season and still make a profit, he must cut back on these amenities. He also expected me to pay for boiled drinking water, which was a first. I immediately began searching for other accommodations because this kind of false advertising was unacceptable. I found a new place to live through a rapid chain of events. While exploring the village, I was looking for the entrance to some Incan ruins when a cheerful-looking woman opened her front door right as I walked past, with a lost and confused expression on my face. The woman's name was Mariana. She kindly walked me to the entrance location, which was about 10 meters from where the map on my phone said it was. Unfortunately, the ruins were closed for maintenance. She was on her way to lunch, and even though I'd already eaten, I decided to join her and get to know this friendly woman who exuded warmth and goodwill. Mariana was from Mexico and volunteered in a hotel. For free room and board, she was a receptionist and carried out various hotel tasks like picking up fresh bread for the guests' breakfast or putting in a load of laundry. Like myself, she preferred the peace and scenery of small towns instead of the chaos and traffic of Lima and Cusco. Later that same evening, I got together with her for dinner at a local restaurant, where I also met Clara, a Brazilian traveler who was volunteering at the same hotel. Clara invited me to join a San Pedro ceremony the next morning, where I met Lily, a young American woman working for a local NGO. She said there was a room available in her shared house for only $120 a month. Through this sequence of friendly new people, I found my new home in the Sacred Valley. Serendipity feels sweeter while traveling. My landlord was a Finnish woman named Aurora who had her own macrame shop in the village. The 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom cottage was decorated with her creations, from colorful wall hangings to intricate toilet paper holders. After a couple of days, I began to feel settled in my cozy new bedroom when the roof started leaking during a night of heavy rain. I moved to a different bedroom the next day that also had a leaky spot in the roof, just not over my bed near my face. Aurora apologized for the inconvenience, but this was how local homes were built. She also alerted me that the rainy season can bring scorpions into the house, but only on the first floor, and I should always wear shoes if I go to the kitchen at night. Luckily, I never saw any. Only the upstairs shower worked. It had hot water for 20 minutes before turning ice cold. To get hot water, I had to turn the handle all the way to the left, then slowly back towards the right until it was almost to the close, but not quite. Taking a hot shower felt like breaking into a safe. Even though the house had its problems, it was comforting to know I didn't have to move for an entire month. I was excited to buy cooking ingredients in bulk, promptly made a list, and power walked to the local market with my shopping bag. Quinoa originated in Peru and Bolivia, cultivated and eaten as a staple food for thousands of years. It was an expensive purchase in the United States, but here, in this Peruvian village, it was cheaper than rice. I bought a kilo of quinoa, a crate of eggs, local coffee, and green lentils. The fruit and vegetable selection was abundant, as expected. I bought plums, bananas, garlic, tomatoes, green beans, and broccoli. I asked one of the sellers in Spanish if she had ginger, and she looked confused. Was my accent that bad? I found out later that ginger was a different word in Peru. In other Latin American countries, it was called jengibre. In Peru, it was quion. This was actually a result of Chinese immigration in the 19th century, where ginger was pronounced jiang. Mariana and I decided to take a day trip to a larger town 20 minutes away, which had more shops, cafes, restaurants, and a large central market. We took a shared taxi van, costing less than $1 each. I sat between a man with a goat and a woman carrying a box of newly hatched baby chicks. Both wore brightly colored indigenous costumes and spoke to each other in the local Quechua language instead of Spanish. After a 20-minute drive, we arrived at our destination and went straight to the market, which was 10 times the size of the one in our little village. I bought nuts, honey, coconut oil, and chocolate, and Mariana bought some personal care items. Afterwards, we treated ourselves to lunch and coffee before heading back to the village, feeling like two country girls returning home from an excursion in the big city. In my rustic little cottage, I had a housemate named Catherine, who accidentally owned 6 horses. How does an accident like that happen? I asked. Catherine laughed with a tired resignation and began her long tale of woe. Growing up on a farm in Canada, it was her dream to have her own agro-tourism business, complete with milk cows, chicken coops, pony rides, animal therapy sessions, homemade cheeses and yogurt, and a vegetable garden with a small orchard. She unknowingly purchased 2 pregnant mares. After they gave birth, the mares were stolen, and by the time poor Catherine found them, they were pregnant again. And so 4 became 6. She thought her dreams would come true when a local man hired her to work on his farm in efforts to help transform it into the agro-tourism business she envisioned. Unfortunately, the so-called partnership ended after 3 months of her hard labor. The man paid her for the first month, then kept her as his unpaid farmhand for the following months. He said he had issues with the bank. After the second unpaid month, she needed money to feed her horses. The man told her to use his cattle food to feed them. One day, while feeding her horses, he began shouting curses at her, accusing her of stealing from him. That was the last straw for Catherine. She got a new job working at a hotel as a receptionist and cleaning lady, where she was often asked to come in an hour early and stay an hour late without getting extra pay. She lived in the Sacred Valley for 8 years and spoke fluent Spanish. I didn't ask her how old she was, but she looked to be in her mid-30s. Every day, she'd tell me more about her long string of misfortunes. Her Peruvian lover tragically died in a motorcycle accident. She tried to start an English school with another local man, returned to Canada, and worked for 4 months in industrial construction. She sent him every paycheck, totaling $21,000, only to return to the Sacred Valley to find he had built a hotel instead of a school. She hired a lawyer to get her money back and succeeded, but the legal fees cost half the money she recovered. There was one year where Catherine moved 6 times in the same village. One of them was a house owned by a British psychiatrist who worked in a mental institution back in England, before having a mental breakdown of her own. She then moved to Peru, believing in the healing powers of ayahuasca. 12 ceremonies later, recovering her sanity was a lost cause. Catherine didn't realize the extent of this woman's madness when she decided to move in. She spent the remainder of her money on transporting her belongings to the woman's house, located in a remote area outside of town. Once she arrived, the woman announced she wanted to do some home renovations. When the construction workers arrived and began working, she kicked them out, shouting curses and throwing objects. Apparently, the rocks in her wall spoke to her, whispering that the workers would cause harm to the house. Catherine lasted 1 week living in this volatile atmosphere, eventually finding her way to our shared cottage. Every penny she made from working at the hotel was spent on her 6 horses, in hopes of one day saving enough to get her agro-tourism business off the ground, or at the very least, take tourists on pony rides along the countryside. I had enormous pity for Catherine. Some of her tales were caused by an unfortunate twist of fate, and others sounded like awfully poor judgment. I imagine her when she first arrived in the Sacred Valley, full of youthful idealism, the hope of helping others and making a difference in the world. Now the optimism that brought her here was worn down by the complexities of a foreign country and replaced by quiet resignation. I gently asked if she'd consider selling her horses, return to Canada to be around people she knew, get back on her feet financially, and start fresh. She replied, selling the horses wouldn't even pay for her ticket home. Her weary face took on a defiant look, like she heard this suggestion a million times before. She firmly stated that she and the horses were meant to be here in the Sacred Valley together. They had what she called a soul contract, a term I'd never heard before. A soul contract was a spiritual agreement made before incarnating into a physical body where souls agreed to certain experiences or relationships in their earthly journey. Before purchasing her horses, Catherine had a consultation with a psychic who told her, yes, this was a soul contract. She was meant to do this. Catherine also claimed she could communicate with her late Peruvian lover. He contacted her through dreams and continued to give her emotional support. I thought to myself, it was financial support she truly needed. I'd often visit Catherine's horses to help brush their coats while she told me more about her troubling 8 years in the Sacred Valley. She had a nice leather saddle she brought from Canada, but it was stolen. Once we passed a local woman while walking towards the stables. Catherine whispered she had 12 children, but didn't know who the father was for any of them. One of her teenage sons got a hold of a fake gun and began robbing cars on the highway in his free time. The boy was arrested but let go since he was a minor. Catherine told me our next-door neighbor's 11-year-old daughter once ran away from home to be her 60-year-old godfather's lover. Her parents called the police, who broke down the door to the man's house and found her in a pink ballerina outfit and her godfather in his underwear. One day, I went for a walk through the village and saw a very tall man with a long white beard, dressed all in white, with no shoes. He was staring right at me and smiled as if he knew me. I went back to my cottage and described the man to Catherine. She said he was a member of a cult who lived in a remote area in the mountains and I should stay away from him. Duly noted. I never would have guessed this little village in the mountains would be the setting of such scandalous narratives. Aurora and Catherine were friends, and they had big plans. one of which was a line of handmade equestrian accessories, combining Catherine's knowledge of riding equipment and Aurora's talents for macrame. They'd sell internationally, use locally sourced materials, and employ local women as fair trade labor. Unfortunately, they had no capital to make the startup a reality. Aurora wanted to start a rabbit-themed cafe. She envisioned guests drinking lattes and herbal teas while surrounded by adorable bunnies frolicking on the grass. Her first bunny was an accident. She had a friend who believed a person who wanted to eat meat should be willing to kill and butcher the animal with her bare hands. So she went to the market and bought a bunny with the intention of turning it into dinner. In the end, she couldn't do it. So she kept the lucky bunny as a pet and gave him to Aurora when she left the Sacred Valley. Aurora treasured that bunny, saying he was a great comfort to her when she felt depressed and overwhelmed by life. When she returned to Finland to visit her family, she left her beloved pet in the care of her boyfriend. He decided to get another bunny from the market to give it a companion. He had a male bunny and told the seller he wanted another male bunny. Well, it turned out to be a female. By the time Aurora returned from Finland, she had a total of 10 bunnies. She also had 5 cats. One of them was recently left on her doorstep, near death and bleeding from the ears. She already had more animals than she could handle, but she couldn't bear to leave the injured cat in the street to fend for itself. It was clear to me that Aurora and Catherine had gentle hearts, good intentions, an affinity for animals, ambitious business goals, and a shortage of money. One day, Aurora came to the house unannounced, eating ice cream and looking distressed. She had a new friend, a Haitian American woman named Christina. Christina was born in Haiti, but had no memory of her early life before the age of 21 when she moved to New York City. Aurora suspected this was a coping mechanism to black out traumatic memories of her youth. Christina was now retired, in the process of selling her Manhattan apartment, and planned to live off her real estate profits and her pension in Peru. Money was not an issue, but her sanity was a different matter. Christina believed the FBI was after her. What for, I can't be sure. But she knew she was safe in the Sacred Valley. She became paranoid whenever she was in a crowded place like Cusco, where many people were on their phones in public. She believed they were spying on her and informing the FBI of her movements and whereabouts. That day, Aurora and Christina were in the village plaza after visiting the market. Christina saw a blind man begging on the street, proceeded to give him all of her newly bought groceries, and offered to pay his rent. A crowd of local people stood by, watching her altruism. This was distressing to Aurora because now every local in town would probably come knocking on Christina's door, asking her to pay their rent. Christina could see how upset Aurora was, so she bought her an ice cream cone to pacify her. I've been reading the works of Henrik Ibsen, a Norwegian playwright known as the father of modern drama. I read Hedda Gabler, where a bored and rebellious newlywed manipulates those around her with tragic consequences. Then I read A Doll's House, where a seemingly happy housewife discovers her life is a carefully constructed illusion and makes a shocking decision to break free. After that, I read The Master Builder, where a successful but aging architect grapples with his fading glory and a mysterious young woman who challenges his dominance. These stories paled in comparison to the shocking narratives I heard while living in this little mountain village. I moved to the Sacred Valley for its tranquility, and ended up bombarded with alarming tales of distress and misfortune on a daily basis. Granted, I still lived my peaceful life with walks in the countryside and strolls through the local market, but with a heightened awareness of the complex characters and situations going on all around me, with foreigners and locals alike. I bumped into Mariana, who introduced me to her colleague, Clara, who invited me to a San Pedro ritual, where I met Lily, who invited me to live in Aurora's house, where I was housemates with Catherine, who I sincerely hope has found peace and prosperity. Pursuing one's dreams, particularly in a foreign country, requires immense bravery and resilience. A kind heart, good intentions, and a strong work ethic are qualities we should all have, but are often not enough. It's the harsh reality of the world. Despite these difficulties, we must hold our heads high and face the day, a little wiser, a little stronger, and carry on. Life doesn't always go as expected. I had a successful career in New York City, then moved to Vietnam to work with children, and now I'm a freelancer traveling the world full-time. Find out more in this video, where I go on a magic mushroom trip in Mexico City and tell you a little more about myself.